Good afternoon, everyone, and I want to thank you for joining us today. I'm Jody Kabensky, the founder and CEO of Normalia Ovarian Cancer Initiative, and we are pleased to present this webinar through our partner Cure Forward, and I just want to turn it over to Martin Naley, who is the founder, who's going to talk to us today about how to connect with the newest treatments through clinical trials.
Thank you, Jody. It's a pleasure to be with you here today, and it's a privilege to be working together with Normalia Foundation on helping more people access clinical trials. So welcome to this webinar. Before I launch into some content here, I'll describe to people how you can participate. There is a Q&A button on the Zoom browser. If you click on that and enter any comments or questions, we'll review them as they come in and either answer them in stride or at the end of the presentation here. So before we get into it, there's a few questions that we can ask of people. By all means, everybody feel free to participate in these polling questions. So I'm going to launch a question here. Okay, it's in progress. First question is, we're interested in the people who are joining this webinar today. It'd be terrific if you could tell us if you're a patient, caregiver, or cancer survivor. All right, well, it looks like a pretty even split of the three different categories. We're also interested in, if you are a cancer patient, to go ahead and tell us the status of your disease to see if we have people here who might be currently looking for clinical trial options. Okay, we're going to end that poll. All right, so it's people who are interested in learning but not necessarily active looking for clinical trials today. And a third question, have you, whether you've ever discussed clinical trials with your physician. Okay, some yes, and some not sure if they have. All right, well, let's get into it then. We can talk about precision medicine and clinical trials. So the topic here is about knowing what's in your DNA in order to reveal treatment options in your cancer. And those treatment options could be clinical trials because the newest treatments might be available only through a clinical trial. So we're working together to make this happen. Our two missions of Cure Forward and Normalia Cancer Initiative very closely intersect with one another. It's about educating people and getting people to the best treatments for their care. And at Cure Forward, we believe in the power of data to change the way that people approach their cancer. When you think about it, every therapy that is used in clinical practice was once proven through a clinical trial. When you think more deeply about that, that means that clinical trials can open up options for the newest cancer treatments in your care. When you think about it here, and actually when you look around, there's a tremendous amount of innovation, of new drugs that are in a pipeline of clinical development, and some of those drugs are actually on market. Many of these drugs are targeting very specific changes in a person's DNA. Now, this slide does not show ovarian cancer in particular, but it does indicate that in many of the principal cancer areas like lung, breast, colorectal cancer, and so on, there is a vast wealth of new drugs being advanced through clinical development. This presents a huge opportunity in cancer care. However, it's important to recognize that because these are new treatments, often they're only available by looking into clinical trials. However, clinical trials have a participation problem. It turns out that 85% of cancer patients are unaware that clinical trials are an option. And that means only 15% ever even consider clinical trials, and only a portion of them actually manage to participate in clinical research. the number that is generally understood is that only 3 to 5% of cancer patients participate in clinical research. That means that the other 95 to 97% of cancer patients are not accessing those new therapies. Patients are interested, of course, in getting the newest therapies. When people are asked if they would participate in a clinical trial, 88% of people who have been in a clinical trial say that they would do it again. And 75% of people say that they would seriously consider clinical trials if they knew that they were an option. But unfortunately, people often find the wrong clinical trial first and try to apply to it and learn later that they don't qualify for that trial. Unfortunately, what that turns into is that people who encounter that stumbling block often don't try again. And 65% of people who don't manage to get into the first trial that they apply to say that they abandon the process. So we want to make sure that people get into the right clinical trial first. And so why don't patients enroll? Well, first, there are so many myths about clinical trials. There's some concern among some people, just because, I mean, it's common knowledge that in clinical trials, you have to compare the new thing against some sort of a control. That control is sometimes referred to as a placebo, which could be a drug that has, or actually no drug, an inactive therapy. In fact, in cancer trials, that never happens. There are often placebos involved in clinical trials, but that's only to separate the people who are getting standard of care plus the new thing versus standard of care plus something else. And in fact, everybody in a clinical trial gets at least the best standard of care. The other reason that people don't enroll in clinical trials is that they're just not aware of all the options. So at Cure Forward, our mission is to overcome those issues by educating and enabling every individual patient to get to the options that might be right for them. Unfortunately, those targeted therapies can be very difficult to find, so we need to help people get that done. So let's say people wanted to find a clinical trial. In order to do that today, first, you might get lucky. Your doctor might know of a clinical trial, but it's impossible for your doctor, even at the elite academic medical centers, to know of all the clinical trials that are available, even around you. It's even harder in the community setting where 80% of cancer patients get their care to find a clinical trial, because those doctors are really not sure about the trials that are around, and there's no way that they could keep up. Meanwhile, you might look around on websites like clinicaltrials.gov, but unfortunately, the information there can be very incomplete. It gets out of date quickly, and sometimes you might find a trial and then learn that the arm of that trial that you're interested in is no longer available to you, or the location has been closed. So that can be frustrating. But there are some significant changes in the landscape that are changing the way that people can find clinical trials and drive their own care. I'll describe those to you here, and that's really what this presentation is about, is that science, government policy, and technology are converging to create an unprecedented opportunity for you to access and use your own data in your healthcare. Let's start with science. Now, science has shown that not all cancers are the same. In fact, cancer is known as a disease of the DNA, and cancer cells are changed at a molecular level, meaning the DNA, which codes for all of life, the RNA, which is an important important other molecule in your cells, and proteins can be changed. And those changes can only be detected by a laboratory test. And these are often called molecular profiling tests. Now, if you have a molecular profiling test, you could actually uncover trials that you would have never found. For example, there's a new innovation in clinical development called a basket trial. And that's where a drug developer tests out one drug in many different cancer types at the same time. You might wonder how that could possibly happen and still be a specific and relevant trial. Well, the way that it works is that cancer patients of many different kinds of cancer from different parts of the body, like lung cancer, colorectal cancer, multiple myeloma, ovarian cancer, and so on, could all have the same kind of testing analysis done. It's called DNA sequencing. It looks at the specific letters of your DNA and the sequence that they're in. It may turn out that those people with different cancer types all have the same mutation. So let's say they have a mutation in a gene called the epidermal growth factor receptor. And there may actually be one trial that serves those patients from all those different cancer types, regardless of what kind of cancer they have, because they have that specific mutation. Now, what's most interesting about these trials, in terms of how you find them, is that if you look around at those trials, they don't say anywhere on them that they're for ovarian cancer patients. They just say that they're for cancers that are looking for an EGFR mutation. So you would not have found that trial. Well, what does that mean then? It means that if you have ovarian cancer in a traditional diagnostic setting where you're only looking at the anatomical pathology where the cancer is, you might find a couple of clinical trials. They may be hard to get to. They may not be just right for you. But if you have a molecular profile done, you might actually uncover other clinical trials that are specific to the changes in your genes. So for instance, if you have a change in gene 2, that might uncover trial C and trial D. And change in gene 1 might uncover trial E and trial F in this diagram. So in this case, by having a molecular profile, you've changed your number of clinical trial options from 2 to 6. That's threefold. Well, let's take a look at what actually happens when we look at real-world data on this. In cancer care, if you do not have a molecular profile, it varies by the cancer type in terms of the impact that has on the trials that are available to you. In lung cancer, for instance, having a molecular profile can increase your trial options by 1.9x. That sounds pretty good. That's almost double. Well, if you look at ovarian cancer, many of the trials are actually basket trials. And so it turns out that by having your molecular profile, you can increase your opportunity set more than threefold, which is really impressive. And it means that it's very important to look into your molecular profile to identify every possible option. So targeted treatments are different from chemotherapy. These are made to specifically affect a change in your DNA and nothing else. And that means that they very specifically affect the changes in your cells. And for many cases, that means, and for many different drugs, that means fewer off-target side effects for these therapies. Now, targeted treatments require upfront testing. And what we say here at Cure Forward is the deeper you look at your DNA, the better chance you may have of uncovering insights that could lead to targeted treatment paths. By deeper, we mean looking at every possible gene as broadly as you can in your genome. And then finding a test could be challenging. Your doctor might not be thinking about this kind of testing as the first thing to do, even though it can be so important in your care. If you talk with the patient guides at Cure Forward, and I'll describe those people to you in just a moment, they can help you through every step of finding a diagnostic test provider so that you can go to your doctor with real options for them to consider in testing. Of course, your doctor has to order that test. We just help you to engage in that conversation to make it happen. Now, there's another important thing that happened. Remember, I described science, technology, and policy. Well, on the policy side, there was a new rule that passed about 20 years ago called HIPAA, which most people have heard of. It's about patient data, privacy, and portability. But largely, what it's really about is giving people the right to access and use their data as they wish to drive their own healthcare. Now, there was one problem with HIPAA, which is that it didn't actually provide people the right to their clinical diagnostic laboratory data. So that actually changed just 2 years ago through some very innovative thinking in the Department of Health and Human Services in the United States. People received the right to receive their data anywhere they are in the country. And then the Health and Human Services Department didn't stop there. In 2015, they went further to say people can get their data in the form and format of their choice, meaning it can be electronic and it can be in the file type of their choice. In 2016, just earlier this year, there was a further clarification that people can get their data in the form and format of their choice, the manner of their choice. That means it can be delivered by email, whatever they choose, to the person of their choice, including to companies like CureForward. Now that's very important because now you have the right to your diagnostic data from these very, very sophisticated molecular profiling tests delivered to your account at CureForward so that you can put it to meaningful use. Now, at CureForward, we help you do that by putting the patient at the center of the whole experience. That means from diagnostic testing to getting clinical data and to becoming more educated about your cancer and ultimately getting you to a clinical trial. The way it works is first we introduce you to a patient guide. These are real people at CureForward. Once you register, every person gets a patient guide, and within a day, that patient guide is talking with you about your care. They work together with you to build out your profile. That's all of your molecular data, your clinical data. They help you find a test. And once your profile is ready, we take that profile and we share it with clinical trial sponsors who might be most suitable for you, who are operating trials that might actually match your DNA. If those clinical trial sponsors see that you're a good fit, they can actually invite you through the clinical trial platform at CureForward, and you receive invitations. That's different from looking around for a clinical trial. They're showing up in your inbox. So what happens at CureForward is first we introduce you to a patient guide. They work with you to build out that profile, get tested, add that test result to your clinical profile. And once that's done, that gets compared against hundreds of clinical trials in our platform. If there's a match, an intersection between you and a clinical trial, then that clinical trial can invite you. If you accept that invitation, then what we do is introduce you to the clinical trial site that is best for you. It could be where you live. It could be another city that your family lives in that you could get to. And we make these trials accessible for you. So at CureForward, we're very pleased to offer a service that connects you to treatment options. Now, we don't recommend treatment options, but we provide options that it's very important that you can discuss these with your doctor. So we take you from being a newly diagnosed or recurring cancer patient to finding a test provider, being able to access your data and bring it into the platform by exercising your data access rights. And then we let your data work for you. Your data is safe. You're in control at CureForward. We believe that you are the owner of your data, and CureForward never tries to say otherwise. And the result of all this is that any person can be the champion of their own care. It's important to point out that testing and clinical trials are big decisions. So the way we think about this is that what we want to enable you to do is to be a partner with your doctor to make those decisions together. This is a different world that we're living in. Patients have so much knowledge to bring to the table to try to flesh out every option with their physician. And now's the time that you can be a partner to your doctor. Our job at CureForward is to help you access the treatment options of tomorrow and to access those today through clinical trials. You can learn more at a dedicated link that we've created. It's cureforward.com/NL, as in Normalia. And thank you again to Jody for hosting us. And now I'll open up to people's questions. The way to ask questions, by the way, is to click on the Q&A in the Zoom toolbar and go ahead and type in questions, and then we'll go ahead and read them out for everybody else. All right, and if people are taking some time to write out their questions, I'll go ahead and get another poll started. We have a couple more of those to use. So here's one now. having gone through this talk, I'll ask, do you understand what precision medicine is? Let's see if we did our job right. All right, it's unanimous. People are feeling confident. All right, and then our last question is whether anybody here has had a molecular profiling test. All right, so how can a company register to be a part of your clinical trial? That's a really good question. Thank you for asking it. I wanted to mention here that CureForward does not charge patients or their family care teams or their physicians to use our services. Everything here is free. Our customers are the clinical trial sponsors. And I imagine that this question is about how a clinical trial sponsor can register to be a part of our service. We work with every clinical trial that is interested in recruiting through our platform. You can contact us directly at team@cureforward.com, and we'll get right back to you. We want to make sure that every possible clinical trial is available to our users through our platform, and we'd be delighted to work with drug developers who have a trial available. All right, I see we have a couple more messages here. Okay, so a question that came through from Twitter. Why don't my doctors know more about this? This is an evolving area of science and medicine. In fact, it's very hard for doctors to keep up. What we think it can make this a lot easier is that rather than a physician having to learn about every trial and every gene, they just have to know about one service that can bring those patients to the clinical trial through their genes. And so what we've done at CureForward is created these tools for patients to work more effectively with their doctors. And we believe that our service can actually help doctors to become expert in clinical trial matching, even though it's not something that they're not doing routinely today. All right, next question that came in is, how do I know if I had the right diagnostic test? I think the answer on that is that there's no wrong diagnostic test. Every piece of data that you can get about your disease can help you to find the right next option. However, sometimes people have had tests that look narrowly at one thing or provide a score about something. There is another kind of diagnostic test, which we call a molecular profiling test. Sometimes it's also called a gene panel. And it's important to find out if you've had that kind of test. You might want to ask your doctor, but you also might want to talk to a CureForward patient guide and tell them about the test you've had, and we'll help to identify if you've actually had a molecular profiling test. All right, next question. Thanks everybody for the questions. Next question is, what's the best way to tell my doctor about CureForward? Well, I guess the easiest way is just to tell them about our website and go to the homepage, and they can go through the educational resources that we have on there. They can also certainly contact us at team@cureforward.com if they have any questions about our service, and we're happy to help doctors become more familiar. What we found is that some physicians who have become familiar with our service recommend it to their patients routinely because it helps them to practice precision medicine and help their patients get on clinical trials. All right, next question. How do I find out if my insurance covers DNA testing or molecular profiling? This is a really important question because the world of reimbursement for molecular diagnostic testing, especially for molecular profiling testing, is murky. It's unclear. And that's unfortunate. We wish it was more clear for people. If you look at what your insurance provider pays for, quite often they will say that they don't pay for molecular profiling. It's important to know that that doesn't mean no. That often, if your doctor expresses that it's medically necessary, that that insurance company may actually pay for the testing. It's one of those things that can be a pleasant surprise. However, we don't want people to feel that anxiety either, that the uncertainty of whether your payer would pay or not pay for the test could actually prevent you from getting tested. So we've worked closely with our test partner providers. We work with 9 different diagnostic laboratories across the United States, and all of them have special affordability and assistance programs for patients. So the answer for that is talk to us, and we'll help you to identify a test provider who will make sure that their test is affordable for you. And we'll make sure that we'll only introduce you to test providers that are relevant for your care. Okay, and then how do I negotiate coverage if my insurer says we don't cover that? Really, that's another great question, and it's what I described a moment ago. Is quite often the answer that you'll see on an insurer's website, or if you call into their 1-800 number, is a no. And it's important to know that no doesn't always mean no. Your doctor can help to make a request for medical necessity, and then we can also work with you to identify testing options that are within your budget. All right, those were a lot of questions. Maybe that will do it. Should I pass it back? I'll pass it back to you, Jody, if you want to have any concluding remarks.
Well, I really don't. I want to, again, thank everybody for joining us. I know that there were some people who may have joined us late, and we just are trying to save lives from ovarian cancer. And when many of the traditional chemotherapy protocols stop working, we are big advocates of clinical trials, and by partnering with Cure Forward, we can find better and more clinical trials and keep you all alive for a long time. I want to thank Martin and the team over at Cure Forward for their assistance in presenting this seminar, and we hope that everybody has a healthy, happy, and hopeful new year.
Thank you, Jody.
You're very welcome.